Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye. नष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तमश्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्टिके ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपकदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम् नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामीनिति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्य देशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभो नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे. Hare Krishna. Reading from Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. By His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. We are reading from Canto 3, Chapter 25, The Glories of Devotional Service. So, we are at text 3. Yad yad vidatte Bhagavan Swachanda Atma Mayaya Tani me Shraddhadhanasya Kirtanyani Anukirtaya. Translation.
Therefore, please precisely describe all the activities and pastimes of the personality of Godhead, who is full of self-desire and who assumes all these activities by his internal potency. Purport. The word Anukirtaya is very significant. Anukirtaya means to follow the description, not to create a concocted mental description, but to follow. Onaka Rishi requested Sutta Goswami to describe what he had actually heard from his spiritual master Sukdeva Goswami about the transcendental pastimes the Lord manifested by his internal energy. Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, has no material body, but he can assume any kind of body by his supreme will. That is made possible by his internal energy. Hare Krishna.
Shaunaka Rishi further prays, Yad yad vidatte Bhagavan Swachanda Atma Mayaya. So the Lord is Swachanda Atma, he is the full of self-desire, Swachanda, and he appears in the Atma Mayaya, and here says, my dear Sutta Goswami, please Anukirtaya, describe these activities. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains, the word Anukirtaya is very significant. Anukirtaya means to follow the description and not to create some concocted story. No, one has to follow in the disciplic succession what one has heard from one's spiritual master. And Shaunaka Rishi is requesting Sutta Goswami, you have already heard from Shukadeva Goswami. So we want to hear the narration as you have heard in disciplic succession. Prabhupada says, the Lord is Bhagavan and he has no material body and he assumes any body by his supreme will, any form by his supreme will. Text 4. Suta uvacha dvaipayano sakastave tvevam maitrayo bhagavan stata prahedam viduram prita anvikshikyam prachoditah.
Translation. Sri Suta Goswami said, the most powerful sage Maitreya was a friend of Vyasadeva. Being encouraged and pleased by Vidura's inquiry about transcendental knowledge, Maitreya spoke as follows. Purport. Question and answers are very satisfactorily dealt with when the inquirer is bona fide and the speaker is also authorized. Here Maitreya is considered a powerful sage and therefore he is also described as Bhagwan. This word can be used not only for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but for anyone who is almost as powerful as the Supreme Lord. Maitreya is addressed as Bhagwan because he was spiritually far advanced. He was a personal friend of Dvaipayana Vyasadeva, a literary incarnation of the Lord. Maitreya was very pleased with the inquiries of Vidura because they were the inquiries of a bona fide advanced devotee. Thus, Maitreya was encouraged to answer. When there are discourses on transcendental topics between devotees of equal mentality, the question and answers are very fruitful and encouraging. Hare Krishna.
So Suta Goswami continued. Dvaipayana Sakha. So the friend of Dvaipayana, Maitreya, was very pleased. Prahedam Viduram Pirita. He was very pleased, and thus he began to answer the Vidura's query about transcendental knowledge. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains that the questions and answers are very satisfactorily dealt when the inquirer is bona fide and speaker is also authorized. So the inquiry should be bona fide inquiry, and speaker also should be the authority in disciplic succession. And Maitreya was such authority. He was an extremely powerful sage, and therefore his friendship with Dvaipayana is recalled here. Dvaipayana is Vedavyas, who is not only the foremost of the sages, he is also the incarnation of the Supreme Lord, literary incarnation. And Maitreya also was spiritually very far advanced. And therefore, Prabhupada says here, Maitreyo Bhagavans Tatha. He is also addressed here as Bhagavan Maitreya. The word Bhagavan can be used, it is always used for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And at the same time, it is also used for somebody who is very special, like Bhagavan Narada. Very great saintly personality. The word Bhagavan is also used. And further, Prabhupada says, this discussion between Maitreya and Vidura was very pleasing. Not only they were bona fide and authorized, they were also sajatiya. Sajatiya means the discourses on the transcendental topic between the devotees of equal mentality. Equal mentality means, sometimes we just simply flow along with certain devotees. Sajatiya. So this is sajatiya means having, anurup mindset with each other. And thus, these discussions are very fruitful and very encouraging. Text 5. Maitreya Uvacha. So here, Suta Goswami, Shaunaka Rishi is inquiring from Suta Goswami. Suta Goswami is now quoting back to the discussion between Maitreya and Vidura. So now, therefore, it is Maitreya Uvacha. Pitari prasthate ranyam matuh priya chikirshaya tasmin bindusare vastid Bhagavan Kapila. Translation.
Maitreya said, when Kardama left for the forest, Lord Kapila stayed on the strand of the Bindu Sarovar to please his mother, Devahūti. Purport. In the absence of the father, it is a duty of the grown son to take charge of his mother and serve her to the best of his ability so that she will not feel separation from her husband. And it is the duty of the husband to leave home as soon as there is a grown son to take charge of his wife and family affairs. That is the Vedic system of household life. One should not remain continually implicated in household affairs up to the time of death. He must leave. Family affairs and a wife may be taken charge of by a grown son.
Pitari prasthite aranyam. So when his Pita, father, Kardama Muni, left for the forest, Matuhu priya chikirshaya, and mother, desiring to please his mother, Tasmin Bindusare Vasit, Bhagavan Kapila Kilah. Bhagavan Kapila, he remained at Bindu Sarovar to please his mother, Devahūti. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada describes about duty of the son and duty of the father. Duty of the grown-up son is to take charge of the mother and serve her to best of the ability in the absence of the father. And Prabhupada says the duty of the father is to leave home. Okay. So as soon as one touches retirement, one should leave home. Leave home doesn't mean one has to physically leave the home, but leave home means that one should be more engaged in the spiritual activities and come out slowly from the material engagement, entanglement. And this happens. We have seen in so many Marwadi families, Jain families, they will hand over their business to the next generation, by the time they are 55, 56, And almost by 60, 62, they are completely out of the business and they should be engaged in spiritual activity. So in the previous times, the father used to literally leave the home and go to north and take vanaprasthashram. Modern times it is not possible, but one can at least be more engaged in preaching, more available to the temple programs, more available for the spiritual activities, focusing on the spiritual growth much more, and handing over the responsibilities to the next generation. It is very important. Text 6. Now, text 6 to 11, we come to the second section of this chapter, where Devahūti is going to ask questions to Kapila Muni, her own son. Text 6. Tamasinam akarmamanam tattvamargargadarshanam swasutam devahutyaha dhatu samsmarati vachah.
Translation. When Kapila, who could show her the ultimate goal of the absolute truth, was sitting leisurely before her, Devahūti remembered the words of Brahma had spoken to her, and she therefore began to question Kapila as follows. Hare Krishna.
So one day what happened? Swasutam, when Devahūti saw her own son sitting very leisurely, then Akarmanam, he is sitting very leisurely, and he is the personality who could show the ultimate path to the life, and he was agree of that personality. Devahūti remembered the words of Brahmaji that your son will enlighten you. Devahūti, Brahma had already told. We have seen this in the last chapter. And then she began to inquire from her own son, Swasutam. Text 7. Very beautiful verse, very famous verse of Bhagavatam. We'll recite this. Nirvinnanitaram bhuman
Nirvinnanitaram bhuman
asat indriyatarshanaat
asad indriya tarshana
yena sambhavyamanena
yena sambhavyamanena
bandham tamaprabho.
pannadam tamabho.
Prabhu.
Devahūti said, I am very sick of the disturbance caused by my material senses. For because of this sense disturbance, my Lord, I have fallen into the abyss of ignorance. Purpose. Here the word asat indriya tarshanat is significant. Asat means impermanent, temporary, and indriya means senses. Thus, asat indriya tarshanat means from being agitated by the temporarily manifest senses of the material body. We are evolving through different statuses of material bodily existence, sometimes in a human body, sometimes in an animal body, and therefore the engagements of our material senses are also changing. Anything which changes is called temporary or asat. We should know that beyond these temporary senses are our permanent senses, which are now covered by the material body. The permanent senses, being contaminated by matter, are not acting properly. Devotional service, therefore, involves freeing the senses from this contamination. When the contamination is completely removed and the senses act in the purity of an unalloyed Kṛṣṇa consciousness, we have reached Sad Indriya or eternal sensory activities. Eternal sensory activities are called devotional service, whereas temporary sensory activities are called sense gratification. Unless one becomes tired of material sense gratification, there is no opportunity to hear transcendental messages from a person like Kapila. Devahūti expressed that she was tired. Now that her husband had left home, she wanted to get relief by hearing the instructions of Lord Kapil.
Very famous verse of Bhagavatam, and how a disciple should ideally approach spiritual master. Nirvinnam, disgusted. Nitaram bhuman, asad indriya tarshanat, yena sambhavyamanena, prapannandam tamaprabhu. So she is saying, Devotee said, my dear son, I am very sick of the disturbance caused by material senses. For because of this sense disturbance, I have fallen into the abyss of ignorance. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explained the words asat indriya tarshana are very important. What is the meaning of asat? Asat means impermanent. Indriya are the senses, and tarshanat. Tarshanat means being constantly agitated by those imperfect senses. So this is how the senses are there. There is a very beautiful prayer by Rupa Goswami. Kamadinam Katina Katita. He says that I am serving my senses for such a long time. How long? For entire life we are serving our senses. Right? We are serving our body. If sometimes one can think like this, that when we are taking bath, that means we are just massaging the hand, massaging the feet, massaging. We think we are the body, but actually the soul is different than the body. Body is continuously changing. Right? The senses are continuously changing, and the senses are continuously demanding. I want this, I want this. The tongue is demanding, the stomach is demanding, right? The sense of touch is demanding. And more we feed to the senses, more they will, more they will demand. Later will come in the pastime of Yayati and Devayani. Yayati and Devayani is saying this, that it is like feeding ghee to the fire. More we feed the ghee, more the fire will ablaze. And this is exactly the condition of asad indriya tarshanat. And therefore, Prabhupada says, and not only in this life, life after life, the senses will continue like this. This life, we have certain set of senses, and by using these senses, we go in certain direction, and another set of senses will evolve. Prabhupada says, the living entity has original spiritual senses, but the spiritual senses are covered over by the material body, and therefore one is engaged in the material activities. But when we engage the senses in the pleasure of the Supreme Lord, then those activities become devotional service. And that's why the devotional service is defined like this. That is purification of the senses. Sarvopadhi vinirmuktam tat paratvena nirmalam. One has to come out of this upadhi. And then why? Because upadhi leads to action. Right? Whatever upadhi, whatever identification we have, those kind of actions we will do. And when we change our identification, Jivere Swarupahe Krishnera Nityadas, then our activities also will change. And activities happen through the medium of the senses. Right? And therefore, our engagement of senses also will change. Sarvopadi vinirmuktam tat paratvena nirmalam rishikena rishikesha sevanam bhakti ruchyate. And when our identification is changed, when we are situated in our Swarupa, then what happens is our activities will be Rishikena, Rishikesha Sevanam. Our Indriyas, the senses, will be engaged in the master of the senses, that is Rishikesha, and that is pure devotional service. So apparently, senses are always engaged, but for what the senses are engaged, that determines. Atmendriya Pritivancha Dhare Kamanam, Krishnendriya Pritivancha Dhare Premanam. So there is not much difference between Kama and Prema, but the object of the activity, it has to be changed to the Supreme Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then one can very swiftly advance in devotional service by engaging senses in the service of the Supreme Lord. Prabhupada says this is possible only when one is fed up of the material enjoyment, right? So, until the time person has some hope in the material world, he will keep on engaged in the material world. And that's why we see very similar shloka in Bhagavad Gita. Bhoga Ishwarya Prasaktanam Taya Aparita Chetasam Vyavasayatmika Buddhir Samadho na Vidiyate. People want to become devotee, but they take, they take some time because they say that Prabhuji, if I become devotee, then I will not be able to eat outside. And he said, you can eat in Govinda. No, no, Prabhuji, I want to go to this restaurant, that restaurant, I want to go to Shreyas, this, that. After a long time, one will realize one can just sit and one can just, take a review of one's life. How many restaurants I have visited? And still the senses are demanding more and more and more and more and more because the senses will never be satisfied. And when one becomes tired of material sense gratification, then there is opportunity of seeking, for the transcendental message. Right. And now here, devotee says, my dear son, I have done all type of enjoyment. Nirvinno, Nitanam. I'm just disgusted with all this. I have all gone to this Nandankana and this, everywhere. Kardama expanded himself into 9 forms. We had a grand sense gratification life. But now what next? These senses will keep on demanding. Now I'm looking for permanent solution to my asadindriya darshanat. And now, Prabhupada says, Devotee expressed that she is now tired. Her husband had left home and she wanted to get relief from the instructions of Kapila Muni. Text 8, again, very, very famous verse of Bhagavatam, we will recite. So this chapter is like this, extremely beautiful verses, one after another, they are going to come in this chapter. We will end up reciting at least half of the chapter. Later, when we see the devotional service section, text 19 to 27, those are extremely beautiful verses. Text 8. Tasya tvam tamasondasya
Satyatvam samsambandasya
yadyaparagam
dushparasyadparagam
chakshurjarmanamante
tatyakshajnamte
tvad anugrahat.
labdham me tvad anugrahat.
Translation. Your Lordship is my only means of getting out of this darkest region of ignorance because you are my transcendental I, which by your mercy only I have attained after many, many births. But this verse is very instructive since it indicates the relationship between the spiritual master and the disciple. The disciple or conditioned soul is put into this darkest region of ignorance and therefore is entangled in the material existence of sense gratification. It is very difficult to get out of this entanglement and attain freedom. But if one is fortunate enough to get the association of spiritual master like Kapil Muni or his representative, then by his grace one can be delivered from the mire of ignorance. The spiritual master is therefore worshipped as one who delivers the disciple from the mire of ignorance with the light of the torch of knowledge. The word paragam is very significant. Paragam refers to one who can take the disciple to the other side. This side is conditioned life, and the other side is the life of freedom. The spiritual master takes the disciple to the other side by opening his eyes with knowledge. We are suffering simply because of ignorance. By the instruction of the spiritual master, the darkness of ignorance is removed, and thus the disciple is enabled to go to the side of freedom. It is stated in the Bhagavad Gita that after many, many births, one surrenders to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Similarly, if after many, many births, one is able to find a bona fide spiritual master and surrender to such a bona fide representative of Kṛṣṇa, one can be taken to the side of light.
Very beautiful prayer by Devahūti. Tasya tvam tamasondasya dushparasya paragam satchakshurjanmanamante labdvam me tvad anugrahat. My Lord, your Lordship is the only means of getting out of this darkest region of ignorance, because you are my transcendental I, which by your mercy only I have attained after many, many births. So this is how Devotee is explaining, saying that, my dear Kapila, I am tired of material life. I am tired of material enjoyment. Now, I just want Dushparasya Paragam. And I have attained you by your mercy only. Now, please enlighten me. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains, this verse is very instructive since it indicates the relationship between spiritual master and disciple. So these are the verses one should be remembering when one sees one's spiritual master. Why? Because the conditioned soul, Prabhupada says, is rotting in the material world for time immemorial. One cannot trace out the history of when the jiva became conditioned. It is like long time. Forget about asking when it happened, because not only this kalpa, this day of Brahma, which you don't know how many Brahmas we have changed, how many Brahmandas have come and gone, and the living entities in the conditioned state in the material world. And therefore, it is very difficult to come out of this entanglement and attain freedom. And for this, what is required is association of bona fide spiritual master. He can take the living entity from this side of conditioned life to the next side of liberated life, life of freedom. Here it is pavarga. Pavarga is pa, fa, ba, bhama. Parishrama. Fa is fena. Ba is bandha. Ma is pa, fa, ba. Bha is bhaya. Ma is mrityu. Other side is apavarga. Here it is asat, achit, nirananda. Other side is satchit, ananda. Right? So it is only by the mercy of the bona fide spiritual master one can cross over this material existence and go to the another side, paragam, right? Par karna hai. And therefore, spiritual master is very rare to have such association. Srila Prabhupada quotes Bhagavad Gita that surrendering to the Supreme Lord is very rare. Bahunam janmanamante jnanavan mam prapadyate. And similarly, after many, many births, one will attain the association of the bona fide spiritual master. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says this, Brahmanda Brahmite. Brahmanda Brahmite. The living entity is moving from Brahmandas time and again. Kaun bhagyavan jeev Guru Krishna prasade paye bhakti lata beej. So receive bhakti lata beej, to receive, the Mahamantra from the spiritual master, to receive the, transcendental knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam in a bona fide sampradaya as it is, which is coming down, unbroken disciplic succession. This is very rare. This is very, very rare, and it is attainable only after many, many births of pious activities. And therefore, such an entity is called as Bhagyavan Jeev. So, by the mercy of Bhagavan, one gets Guru, and by mercy of Guru, one attains lotus feet of Bhagavan. And here, in case of Devahūti, both Guru and Bhagavan, they are the same. Kapila, she is a very special personality. And she is praying like this. Text 9. Ya adyo Bhagavan pumsam Ishvaro vai bhavan kila lokasya tamasandasya chakshuh surya ivoditah. Translation.
You are the Supreme
Please,
Personality.
please read.
You
Go
are,
ahead.
you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the origin and the Supreme Lord of all living entities. You have arisen to disseminate the rays of the sun in order to dissipate the darkness of the ignorance of the universe. Purport. Kapila Muni is accepted as the incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Kṛṣṇa. Here the word Adaya means the origin of all living entities, and Pumsam Ishvara means the Lord, Ishvara of the living entities. Ishvara Parama Kṛṣṇa. Kapila Muni is the direct expansion of Kṛṣṇa, who is the sun of spiritual knowledge. As the sun dissipates the darkness of the universe, when the light of the Supreme Personality of Godhead comes down, it at once dissipates the darkness of Maya. We have our eyes, but without the light of the sun, our eyes are of no value. Similarly, without the light of the Supreme Lord, or without the divine grace of the spiritual master, one cannot see things as they are.
Now here, he says, Sa adyo Bhagavan pumsa. My dear Lord, you are Adi, you are Bhagavan. Ishvaro vai bhavan kila. Lokasya tamasandasya chakshuhu surya ivodita. You are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, origin, and the Supreme Lord of all living entities. Just as the sun arises to dissipate the darkness of ignorance of the universe, similarly, my dear Lord, you have arisen in my womb to disseminate, the transcendental knowledge. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes that Kapila Muni is the incarnation of the Supreme Lord. He is called as Adhya, the original living entity. And he is Puman Ishvara. He is the Ishvara of the living entity. So, Ishvara Parama Kṛṣṇa, Satchidananda Vigraha, Anadiradir Govinda Sarva Karana Karana. So, he is called as a Parama Ishvara because he is the supremely controller. There are many minute controllers, We are also controller to some extent, but there is Parama Ishvara, there is a supreme controller, and he is the Supreme Lord Kapila, or who has appeared here. Srila Prabhupada further explains just that the sun dissipates the darkness of the ignorance. Similarly, the light of the Supreme Lord will dissipate the darkness of Maya. Krishna Surya Sam Maya hai andhakar. Yahan Krishna tahan nahi Maya radhikar. And when there is a light of the Godhead, then by the light of Godhead, by the mercy of divine, the spiritual master, one can actually see the things in a right perspective. And that right perspective is Sambandham Krishna Sambandhe. One can see the things in relationship with the Supreme Lord. So we will conclude here and continue tomorrow. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaura Bhakta ki jai. Thank you, Prabhupada.
Thank you, Prabhupada. Thank you,
Thank you,
Prabhupada.
thank you, Prabhupada.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna.
Prabhupada, thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna. Dandavad Pranam.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna.